Now, you know we love space news here on The Context. Tonight, it is the next step in China's ambitious space program. The country's space agency has launched a rocket that it's hoping will make history. Well, this is the moment that the Chang'e 6 mission blasted off from the Wenchang Space Launch Center in southern Hainan province. On board is a probe that will aim, for the first time, to collect samples from the far side of the moon. Well, the spacecraft will attempt to make a soft landing on the South Pole Aitken Basin. It's one of the largest known impact craters in the solar system. It then hopes to return the samples successfully to Earth. The journey is expected to take 53 days to complete. Let's speak now to former NASA astronaut who was once the commander of the International Space Station, Leroy, who joins us now. Leroy, always a delight to talk to you. I love talking to you about space. And give me your sense of how significant this is. Not only that China has launched this probe, but it's been a successful launch.
That's right, and China has been interested in the moon for a very long time. Of course, the moon is important culturally to many cultures, of course, to China especially. And so this is the sixth in a series of these probes, these Chang'e probes that have been launched over the years. This one, number 6, is basically a duplicate of number 5. That is the spacecraft, the rover, all that is the same, except it's going to the opposite place. 5 went to the northern pole of the moon on the near side, the side that's facing us. This one will go to the south side of the moon on the far side, which is away from us. So in a way, they're collecting samples from the 2 different poles in 2 different regions. And so it will collect approximately 1.5 to 2 kilograms of sample and then bring them back to Earth. So very exciting mission.
You make it sound super simple and super easy, and I know it is anything but. And explain to me why this has its own difficulties, isn't it? Particularly on that dark side of the moon. Just remind people what that is.
Well, sure. When you're on the far side of the moon, you don't have direct line of sight to the Earth. That means communication is an issue, right? Because radio waves, you have to be able to point it at the right direction. And so the Chinese actually have a satellite on the far side that can relay those communications back and forth between the control center and the spacecraft. And also, you can't have any direct observation if you don't have a satellite in orbit of the activities. And even from the Earth, it's somewhat difficult. But this is a challenging mission. We've seen recently, in recent months, the Japanese, a commercial company here in the United States, they've both landed on the moon, but then their spacecraft tipped over. Not an easy thing to do, especially if you're deploying a rover, which the Chinese have done several times. So this one should be okay because, like I said, it's a duplicate of the last spacecraft that they launched to the moon. And so it should be able to do its job, and I would expect it to be successful. But it's not simple. It may sound easy, but it's not an easy thing to do.
No, looking at just even a little bit of the detail, and it absolutely is astonishing that they even get it up there, never mind get all the way back too. They say they're going to look for lunar samples, lunar soil, lunar rocks, conduct experiments. What are they actually looking for up there, Leroy?
And so they're looking to see if things are different on the far side, and they've already had a probe and a rover on the far side that would have been operating, and I believe may still be operating, and they've just made some significant discoveries. Things are different on the far side. They've come up across rock formations and things like that are different, and so this will add to that fountain of knowledge, if you will. And of course, everyone's interested in the South Pole region because that's where in some of these craters where it never sees the sun, there's the possibility or probability of water ice there, along with other possibly precious things that are in the soil. And so by sending a sample back, they will gain a better understanding of what's going on down in those craters.
Yeah, and as you said, really important insights that we may get from these samples, assuming they can get back to us here on Earth. Talk to me about what this might allow. Are we talking about the potential, and I know this has been touted by both America and China, about a moon base, a permanent presence up on the moon?
Absolutely. China has talked about, of course, they have a program to send their own astronauts to the moon. They intend to do that. They said sometime, hopefully before 2030, but around 2030. This will help to understand what they're getting into. Their longer term program is to establish a base. They have an agreement with Russia to establish an international lunar base there on the moon. Of course, NASA, we have our own plans of establishing a base there in the South Pole. We've got our Artemis program going, and then there's the commercial side. SpaceX is one of the major players, the main player, frankly, in developing a human lander for NASA. And SpaceX, I believe, will go there with or without NASA anyway. But it's an exciting time. And so this is kind of building the foundation of knowledge to have a successful lunar base there.
Leroy, stay with us. I want to bring in Joe Walsh, who's on our panel tonight. And Joe, for so long, the US has dominated space exploration, hasn't it? And I wonder whether this starts looking like a new space race, especially as Leroy was explaining there about a permanent base on the moon. And also, given those tensions between the US and China right now, we know there's been a lot of diplomatic effort to try and ratchet down tensions. But it does put the two face to face once again, doesn't it, in a whole new way?
Ben, that's the sense that I get right now and listening to you two right now is that we're in another race. We're in another space race. We're in another race to the moon where it used to be us and Russia. Now you've got a number of other countries, India, Japan, China now, very involved. You would think, right, the hope would be that again, all of humanity on this planet would cooperate when it comes to any information, any material, any interesting substances garnered from the moon, that we'd all cooperate and all be kind of on the same team. But I'll be honest, I don't think America thinks China's going to behave that way. I know that government officials in America want us to get back and with a manned mission to the moon and set up a colony there before China does, because I think there is a natural distrust right now of China.
Could this be the thing, Joe, that we all need right now? Because the idea of being up on a space station, and I'm going to ask Leroy about it because he knows this firsthand in just a sec, but the idea, you look back at Earth and it's this tiny little thing where all of our problems, all of our conflicts, all of our wars, all of our disputes are on this tiny little thing floating in space. And actually we could all do with that right now to remind us that we're pretty insignificant and actually we should just get along because there's bigger stuff out there.
Oh, gosh, Ben, yes, right? The tiny blue dot. We all live on this little tiny blue dot. I mean, I keep thinking as I listen to you two that 100 years from now, they're going to look back at this broadcast and kind of smile and laugh at us as who knows how many people might live on the moon. So, yeah, we're all in this together. My hope is that that's the spirit that all of these countries would take.
And Leroy, I mean, you've been up there. You've had that incredible view back down to Earth. It must remind you of how insignificant we are. And does it give you a sense of peace when you're up there looking at this little Earth floating in space?
Well, it does. It's interesting because you look out into deep space and you do get that feeling that we are just insignificant for sure. But, when you look at the Earth, it's colorful, it's vibrant, it's alive. It looks very peaceful, even though intellectually, of course, those of us that are up there watching it, that there's a lot of conflict, a lot of suffering going on, even at the moments that we're orbiting over these places. And international cooperation, I've always been a big believer in that. I saw it firsthand with the Russians. Even with the conflicts that we have with each other, at least we have one very visible civil space project that we're both aligned on, and it's in both of our interests for it to succeed. And that's why I was advocating some years ago to do something similar with China and their space program. And China at the time, some years ago was up for that, in fact, advocating for it. And then frankly, it was the United States that slammed the door on them. So now they're going it alone. And they've got an operational space station. It's going very well. And now they're going to go on with their own lunar ambitions, with or without us. And they've got international cooperation. The French, the Italians, the Pakistanis all have experiments on this latest probe that just launched. And so I think that is the way to go. But, the politics rule the day on anything, and even in space exploration. So we've got to be realistic about it as well.
Leroy, love talking to you. I could talk to you all night, but I've got to squeeze in some other news, unfortunately. But thank you, Leroy Chang'e. Always good to get your insight on stories like this. Thank you.